So my topic. So first, my name's Will. I'll have a little intro slide on myself next. But social commerce, why it is so hard for big brands and how your startup can help. In case anyone's tweeting, you can use that hashtag. Just joking. You can't really use that hashtag. But if anyone does, I'll give you 3 more seconds to use that hashtag. All right, no. So a little bit about me. My name's Will Young. I'm a director of Zappos Labs. Zappos Labs is a small little R&D office here in San Francisco. So we're kind of like a little R&D shop for Zappos. Our main headquarters is in Las Vegas. We have 1,300-ish people in Las Vegas, about 10 of us here in Zappos Labs. I'll talk a little bit about what more we focus on. Separately, I'm a general partner at the Vegas Tech Fund. I live in San Francisco, our office here, but I'm a general partner there. It's an angel seed investment fund to kind of bring great community building startups to downtown Las Vegas, and it's kind of like part of some urban revitalization work we're doing there. So, and completely randomly, I'm one of the best donut eaters at Zappos. 23 donuts in 20 minutes. I'm trying to beat that this year, because amazingly, that was only second place. So this year, going for first. All right. So, well, first, to kind of expectation set, who kind of works in a fashion or commerce-related thing? Anyone? What do you do? Okay. Gotcha. Cool. Tweetstore.com. Anyone else in the fashion space? What? Tickets on. Okay. Anyone else? For entertainment companies? Okay, got it. So cool. Yeah. What do you do? Try celery? Okay. Gotcha. Cool. So, what I wanted to cover today is to kind of go with my topic is cover a bunch of things at Zappos that we've tried in the social commerce space. And I kind of want you guys to play along, and you can guess which of them worked and which of them didn't before I tell you how they did. It'd be kind of a fun experiment. We'll see how that goes. I've never done this before, but when you guys hear social commerce, what are some of the things you think about? Just shout something out. Sorry. Click on link. Did you say Facebook earlier? Yeah, totally. Sorry. Daily deals. Yep. Pinterest. I love it. People ask me all the time, who does social commerce best? And I always say Pinterest, which is weird because they're not a retailer or a commerce site, but I think that they do some really interesting things. So, so kind of next thing. So who's good at it? We talked about Pinterest. If you think about like a big brand, who's good at social commerce? Whatever definition you want to use, but you think of this big brand and you think they're good at social commerce. No one. Anyone? Maybe a small brand that you think these guys got social commerce correct. No one. Shoot. Okay, so what are they called? Okay, One Live. What do they do well? Okay. No joke. I'll raise 100 million. That'd be cool. That'd be great for me. So if we think about, so a couple things we think at Zappos is, some people think social commerce, it's all about like the marketing on Facebook or tweeting out deals or building up real email lists. And I think probably falls under the umbrella. Some of the things my team specifically focus on at Zappos Labs is, how do we make the commerce itself more social? And I'll talk a little about that. This slide's not too relevant. I've given a variation of this talk, and people are like, Zappos! I'm like, you're wrong. Name one good thing we do socially. And they're like, well, you answer my complaints on Twitter, which is true. We do. And so I think when we use Twitter, awesome customer service channel. If someone tweeted right now, where's my Zappos order? Someone's going to tweet you back, direct message us your order number, and we'll tell you right now. And that's amazing. And I think so customer service is really good. On the Facebook side of things, I think we have a lot of work to do. I think, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So like when we think about social commerce, where we think it's really interesting is because if you think about offline shopping, shopping's one of the more social things we do. You go to malls, and we actually do this. Great thing about being in San Francisco, we'll go to Westfield as a team or a subset of our team, and we just watch how people shop. A little bit creepy, but it's pretty interesting, right? It's so rare to see people just alone. Maybe in the workday you see people alone because they're taking a break from lunch. But on weekends, people are shopping in groups, and it's such a social thing, and it's not. And obviously, there's some people who just do it alone. They walk in, they walk out. But I think when we see shopping in real life, it's social. It's, you know, you have lunch, you make an experience. You go to stores that you weren't planning on going because you just feel like browsing. So we think, well, human nature maybe makes shopping pretty social. So when Amazon, obviously enormous in e-commerce, and then Facebook, enormous in social networks, I think so many people thought, here's this new holy grail of e-commerce, and maybe whatever they want to call it, maybe social commerce. They're thinking Facebook is now a shopping mall with 1 billion people we can sell to. And so I think there are a lot of people over the last couple of years kind of jumped in with Facebook stores. And they tried Gap, GameStop, JCPenney, Nordstrom's, and a bunch of other ones. None of those exist anymore. And I think good for them for all trying, because you have to try these different things when you're kind of hitting a new business domain. But I like this quote. Well, I don't like this quote, but it's an interesting quote from Ashley, who's a VP of Marketing and Strategy at GameStop, is they just didn't see the return on investment. So they spend this time, build a store, Facebook app, or just an iframe, didn't see any user buy it. And so they shut it down. And they, to them, at least at the time Ashley said this, social was more just about communicating with their customers. So it's more about like maybe getting you deals, helping you with customer service. But I think I struggle to believe that's all social commerce is. I think marketing is marketing, but I think like if we jump back a bit, like all these people in the mall, they're not shopping together because the mall's doing good marketing to them. They're shopping together because they want to. So I'll blast a bit more ahead. So, you know, those are some of the questions we ask ourselves. As you guys might be a small brand, you should ask yourselves that too. Is social just for marketing? Can we bring social to our sites? Really interesting challenge. And can we help our customers shop with their friends? Because I think I've talked to a lot of startups trying to solve that through a technology problem, and I'll talk about a couple of those. So again, those are some of the things we think about. If you're doing a commerce site, think about those things as well. So I'm going to walk down of what we tried at Zappos, and I'd love for you guys to think about. Feel free to say, that would never work, that's a good idea. I kind of want to hear what you guys think. So what we've tried. Play along. So who uses Facebook chat? That little, just in their everyday life, not in business, but in everyday life. Chat with your friends, message them back and forth. So people use it. It's a good system. It's built-in chat. You can talk with your friends, see who's online. So we thought, great. We need a way for our customers to shop with their friends. Because again, that's one of the intuitive things we think about when we think about social commerce. So we launched this, and we actually had a couple things. You know, you could enter in an email address, a telephone number. They'd get a text. They'd get an email, say, hey, Mike wants to shop on Zappos with you. And then when they came into the experience, when your friends clicked on that link or clicked on that SMS, they'd either see kind of a mobile view, or it's kind of like Facebook chat. And I don't have a picture here, but after you complete this, it looks like that really familiar Facebook chat window. So who thinks that's a good idea? Who would use that? All right, so just one person. Terrible idea. And it was one of those ideas where we're like, this is brilliant. People use Facebook chat. We use Facebook chat. It's what our customers are asking for. And so what we tried when we launched it was, we saw a bunch of people saw this option, shop with friends. They're like, I want to shop with my friends. I'm going to try this. So they do this, send a text, send an email, and then they stare at that window. How long are you going to stare at that window before you give up? 10 seconds, 10 seconds tops. Even if your best friend in the world texts you, shop with me on Zappos right now, how long is it going to take you to respond? Long time, right? You're at work, you're in the bathroom, you're cooking, you're doing whatever. So right away we're like, no wonder that. It was one of those things we did, and we immediately thought, no wonder no one used that. And I think what we actually did was made not just a neutral shopping experience, but actually a worse shopping experience. Because we set people's expectations on, try this amazing Facebook-style chat thing. Your friends are going to flock to help you, and then they stare at this window, their friends don't come, and they actually think less of Zappos because of it. So it's kind of an interesting thing. This was really early on. We actually worked with a startup that no longer exists to implement it. But it was kind of one of those ideas that made sense at the time. I like this, you know, so I kind of want to use one example from Bloomingdale's. And it's good, because I think one of the things that we learned in our implementation of Shop with Friends was doing synchronous actions hard. So what Bloomingdale's has, and obviously, you know, I don't work at Bloomingdale's, so I don't know any data or how well or this did or did not work. I'm guessing it's not working well because I just checked their website today and it's not there anymore. So, but I thought it was a good example. I've actually used it personally and it worked out great. So what it was on the basic Bloomingdale's website, you'd have a little button that said "Ask a Friend," and so it was out of the way. So I'll talk a little bit about more. But a lot of customers actually, when they're shopping online, they're not thinking social, but they had it a little out of the way. It said "Ask a Friend." You clicked "Ask a Friend," then these buttons that said "Add to Poll" popped up. So everyone's like, "Oh, I can create a Facebook poll. That works." And so I thought it was a great experience. You added a couple things, you click share, and then it posted into Facebook, where now your friends could come in, click on what they liked, Facebook comment. I actually thought that was great. I was actually hoping that I'd hear a good success story from Bloomingdale's on that and be something that we could kind of leverage. The fact it's not there anymore maybe implies they weren't seeing a lot of traction. I'm not sure. I don't want to read too much into it, but I thought that implementation was great. So things to consider in the social realm, I think. Shopping, it's not like Facebook, right? People don't want to spend 3 hours on Zappos.com like we do on Facebook. So I think that thinking about how to make it synchronous versus asynchronous is really important. And then kind of thinking about Facebook versus site versus maybe some kind of blended experience is also important. Try those different things. Kind of one more experiment we did. It's called Tweetwall. It's kind of a little microsite, but on any given day, people are tweeting about Zappos products. Luckily, it's like we have customers, and some of it's from the share button we have on product details. But surprisingly, when we analyze all these tweets, most of them are people copying and pasting them into Twitter.com. They just want to say, what do you think about this shoe? Do you think this hat would look good on me? Or, oh my God, I love this purse. So it's great that we see all this conversation. So we built something called Tweetwall. Not rocket science, but we kind of listened to all the tweets, filtered out spam, because there are some affiliates like kind of spamming some links, and then a nice visualization. So kind of pinchy, but, and again, not that we ever expected this to be someone's primary way to shop, but it's kind of a fun thing to say, if you felt like going to Zappos and just kind of exploring, this might be a fun thing to take. So what we do at Zappos Labs is we'll put out this little experiment and see, is there any traction? Is there any interesting sign that makes us think, should I be talking closer? Or? Okay. All right, sure thing. Can you guys hear? Whoa, that's better. I'm going to try and out-talk that office hours. Yeah. So, again, we're not expecting this to change e-commerce, but we took a lot of learnings from this. And one of the big learnings was we read thousands of actual tweets. And it's kind of like the eternal debate about Twitter, right? Like, can you ever say anything intelligent in 140 characters? And I think Twitter's proven that people have very intelligent things to say in 140 characters. It's not all intelligent, of course. But we thought, well, this was interesting. We're reading some interesting data. So our next step was, this is maybe an old screenshot, but give or take what our Zappos product details page looks like. If you're a Zappos customer, that probably looks familiar. We thought, all right, what could we do about that? If you want to write a review on Zappos, that's what you need to fill out. Pretty heavy, right? Maybe you love those shoes and you want to write a review, but that's a lot to go through. So kind of our evolution was, what's up, man? Could we push tweets to be the next generation of reviews? Super lightweight. That could be interesting to tweet stores, right? Could it be intelligent enough that we actually see it change consumer behavior if they could read all the tweets about a product? So we launched an experiment called we called it social proof internally. It was labeled Social Buzz. So what you can see is on this tab, we call it Social Buzz. We'd actually show a little number indicator on how many tweets there were. And you could see how many times it's been shared on Facebook, pinned, how many tweets about it. You could read the tweets about the product. If there are no tweets about a product, which is actually pretty likely, we have 150,000 things in our catalog. Not all of them have tweets. It was a big call to action. Tweet what you think. Join the conversation. Tweet what you think about this product. And that was kind of one of our performance metrics. We wanted to see if we could really increase the number of tweets about the product. And this was kind of fun. I think we've talked a lot about, a lot of people are doing stuff in the recommendation space. People who viewed this also viewed this. But what this was is we pushed related products that had tweets about them. So maybe you're a mom, you're super self-conscious about what you should buy for your son, and people engaging and talking about products matter to you, so maybe that mattered. Who thinks this is a good idea? A few more people? All right. I think it's an awesome idea. It wasn't. And I'll talk a little bit about why. So what we saw, I'm not saying it wasn't a good idea, but I'll tell you about what we saw in the data. So we ran an A/B test. I think a lot of you probably know what an A/B test is, but what we did is we showed 50% of our customers, 50% of customers saw this tab, and 50% of them didn't. And luckily, Zappos has crazy scale. You know, we have, you know, on some days, 150,000 orders, a couple million people a day. So we could see data pretty quickly whether that worked or not. Well, scary? Well, maybe not scary, and it wasn't that surprising. Even with that big number there, 2%, I think we ran this for 2 weeks, 2% of people who saw that even wanted to click on that. So that kind of told us something. We're like, well, maybe that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just people aren't used to seeing social when they're shopping. They just want to get their Nine West shoes and get out of there. So we're like, well, 2%, that's not necessarily bad. So we looked at the data of those 2%, and they did great. They clicked on more products. They bought a little bit more. They were engaged. All good signs. But just having that tab there brought the entire test group down. So we actually lost. If you think about A/B tests, it's essentially, at its most basic is, for 2 weeks, did this group of customers sell more stuff than this group of customers? And this group actually lost by a statistically significant amount. So that's crazy, right? Like, why would this, even though only 2% of people used it, and those 2% performed better, it brought the entire test group down. If any of you are UX or designers in here, I think you'll kind of, that especially in e-commerce, you just add anything to your product details page or search results, it can distract people and make them not buy. So I think that was kind of one of a painful lesson to learn. Well, not painful in the sense of like, I'm out of a job painful, but painful in the sense of when we want to do social stuff, it reminded us how hard it is. Because we want to put cool social features in front of customers. But this was like that example of, we put this little tab that no one even had to click on, and it made everyone do worse. So kind of scary. But so most people, so what our big learning there was, at least for our, and this is where I kind of go into our big brand. When you think about Zappos, what's the first thing you think of? Second thing you think of? Customer service. So if I kept going down that line, social would probably be never in the first thing people think about. So they're not expecting to see social. When they see it, it might be a distracting. And I think that's what's hard for a big brand. I think some of the startups coming up now, like some new e-commerce companies, they're like, boom, out of the gate, social. The customers get it, the customers see it, the customers expect it. But for a big brand to introduce it, it's kind of hard. One more example. And again, feel free to just jump in with any questions. We launched one more thing. So we talked about Pinterest. So we saw Pinterest was huge. We've done some Facebook apps. We've done some Twitter stuff. We really saw Pinterest is blowing up. They're not even a retailer, but my fiance, it blows my mind. The first time I ever saw her go to Pinterest and type black dress, and she was shopping. I was just like, what are you doing right now? She's like, I'm looking for a new dress to buy. And she was on Pinterest, and that really blew my mind on like how much I think traditional retailers are failing at that inspiration and helping people find stuff. So what we did on Pinterest, pinpointing. Again, a microsite. So you could come to pinpointing, tell us your Pinterest username, or maybe you just want to find a user that you're interested in. Like, so Nina Garcia, she's editor for Glamour magazine. She does judge on Project One Way. You can say, I want to see what Nina Garcia likes. So what we did on pinpointing is analyzed her pins and then make Zappos-based recommendations off of it. So kind of fun. Who thinks that's a good idea? I also think it's an awesome idea. So this, who thinks it worked? All right, so this one kind of is in the middle. It's still there. It didn't not work. We've actually seen people who use it actually are super engaged. And I think one of the interesting things we've seen is when we said, what do you think of when you think about Zappos, a lot of people said shoes. One of the things we intentionally did in pinpointing was pushed other products. So I remember this one example is we were walking a New York fashion blogger through this on the phone. And I just told her, you know, enter your Pinterest username. She has like New York Daily Front Row. And the first thing she saw was that morning she pinned like this picture from a Vivienne Westwood runway show. I actually wasn't familiar with that brand, but I guess it's a high-end couture brand. And then we recommended Vivienne Westwood dresses. She's like, you guys have Vivienne Westwood dresses? Even though she was a fashion blogger, she still thought we only sold shoes. And even if she thought we sold clothes, the fact that we were recommending $2,000 dresses just blew her mind. So I think those examples we've seen in pinpointing, and that's great, right? You know, I think even if she didn't buy at that moment, her brand impression of Zappos has changed forever. And hopefully she's telling her friends, especially as a fashion blogger, that's really exciting to us. So one of our challenges is, whenever we market this, So Zappos has about 25 million customers. I'm not sure what Pinterest's latest count is, maybe 10, 12, I don't know. There's different reports on how many customers they have. So something like this is only relevant to a portion of our customers, and then even those customers who are on Pinterest, if you came to Zappos and all you wanted to do was buy those size 8 pairs of 9 Wests, you don't want to try stuff like this. So when we've promoted it, if you guys are familiar with bounce rate and web technology, bounce rate is essentially someone comes to an experience, doesn't even click on a single thing and leaves. So our bounce rate was really high for this, probably about double Zappos, maybe 2.5 times regular Zappos.com. So we saw good behavior and metrics when people tried it, but we had this huge bounce rate. So what does that mean? So when we think about the challenge there is like, how do we put it in front of people that matter? So think about like this is, I think, what Zappos.com looked like this morning. So it's where a lot of our customers go. So we think, how would we promote pinpointing on this? And has anyone ever worked in a retail store before? Just, you know, like traditional retail. So if you guys know retail, like what you put in that front window, super important, right? You know, it's probably going to sell more. You only put your best items in there because you're not going to put this weird thing that won't get people into your store. You can almost think of home pages like that. You want to put this stuff that sells. So imagine if we replaced running shoes, which people expect from Zappos, with pinpointing. How do you think that would do? Pretty terrible, right? And we tried stuff like that. And so we see, for example, what are some metrics we care about? How many people clicked on it? Tiny percentage. We're talking like a fraction of what people would click on compared to running shoes. And then conversions lower. So tough challenges. So that's why we end up with, so if anyone wants to try Zappos pinpointing, good luck trying to find it. It exists, but this is where we are on our homepage right now. And that's a challenge for big brands because when we run that A/B test for 2 weeks and we see that maybe our test was 1% worse, and that wasn't the exact number, but if we were 1% worse, that could be tens of thousands of dollars a day. So you can imagine the great thing about Zappos is we'll run those tests, and if we lose, I still have my job because everyone's like, good test, what's next? But that's why we end up here, and then that just takes you to our expo page where you can kind of find some of our experiments. So that's when I continue to say, big brands, social stuff is hard. Kind of, I'll give you one more example. This is a project that never actually came out of alpha, but I thought, I'm not going to bias you when I ask you if you think this is a good idea. But we think about it in labs a lot, like, you know, what are some real problems people have? And you know what? I think that selling stuff on Facebook, when everyone created Facebook stores, wasn't a real problem people had. No one was asking, shit, I wish I could buy this on Facebook right now, instead of opening up the other tab and having full functionality. No one asked, like, I wish I had a store that was 10% as functional, less secure, and a way to buy that I don't have to leave Facebook, right? So we really think about, like, what are some real problems people have? And who's ever not known what to wear to something? Come on. Who's always known what to wear every day of their life? Okay, so I'm assuming everyone else has this problem every now and then. So this was a problem that we really thought people had. Like, what should I wear to blank? So we kind of think of that as a problem domain. So we actually kind of did the lean startup thing. I think the Zappos Labs team, we're super lucky that we get to try a lot of these things. So we kind of launched a pretty simple landing page like this just to see what are people even going to fill in there. We kind of had some hypotheses. But if you were to guess the top 3 things people entered, or shout out some things that you think people might have entered. A date? Sorry, what was that? Wedding? Genius. Those were our top 3 things. Was a date, wedding, and a job interview. So close to work. So if you went to Zappos.com right now and typed job interview into search, how good do you think the results would be? I'm telling you, it's terrible. It won't give you anything intelligent. If you went to Amazon and typed job interview, pretty random, right? So here's the interesting thing. So we knew it's a real problem domain that big sites weren't solving. I think wedding, we'd be pretty good. I think we have pretty good taxonomy around wedding. But a date, man, the chances of you going to any big brand and typing date into search and getting something that makes sense for you, almost impossible. So we thought about this problem domain that people really had, and we thought about, so this was our solution to it. And sorry, I kind of have some bad screenshots here. So we piloted it, and So it kind of looks like this. So leveraging some Pinterest stuff, and it wasn't all about blasting it on your Facebook wall, blasting it to all your Twitter friends, because that's not what we do in everyday life, right? You know, I'm sure some people in this world, when they don't know what to wear on Friday, will tweet out, "People tell me what to wear." But if we don't know what to wear on a date, who are you going to ask? A couple of your best friends? Maybe you don't know what to wear in a job interview, you maybe ask your old coworker. So that was kind of our thesis of this problem. Don't make it about blasting it on social, but make it about some of your key friends and have conversations. So how do people solve this problem today? Because it's a problem we have. What do people do today? Shut up. Right, right. Maybe not ask our friends, but if we want to ask our friends, how do we ask our friends today? Text message, totally. IM, email. So that one of our goals was, could we make an experience that's better and easier than instant messaging your friends or emailing where everyone's replying with links back and forth? So who thinks this is a good idea? Wow, tough crowd. So a couple people. You guys like everything. You guys should be great Zappos customers. So some of the loose data we had is, so we totally lean startup this, and we knew it wasn't ready for prime time, but we just kind of wanted to see if we were even close. So we launched this as a landing page, and we bought some Google AdWords for people who were actually Googling what to wear to weddings, what to wear to job interviews, what to wear on dates. So it's pretty targeted traffic. So we drove about 3,000 people here. And how many of them do you think actually asked a question? 10%? We actually had good metrics. We actually had, because it was pretty targeted, we had maybe 60, 70% of people actually ask a question. And for us, super excited. So it took them to the next page, which was a version of this that was kind of blank, but with a big invite your friends. That's where we lost everyone. We lost, for example, so I would think, and don't quote me on these numbers, these are roughly the numbers. Of the 3,000 people we brought here, we maybe got, guess how many people said, I want to invite my friends? 2. 6! But here's, a bunch of people clicked on it, right? But then they see this Facebook Connect button, or they see send this link to your friends, or they see email. They're like, I'm just going to IM my friends. This is a real problem, but I'm just going to email them. So what did we learn out of that? Is it's hard for a brand to inject themselves between you and your friends. And it's what sometimes big brands, we try and do. You're talking with your friends, we want to just jump right in there, and we think we're adding value. I actually think, we piloted this also within Zappos employees, and we had some employees, huge engagement, because they kind of had that trust about Zappos, and they didn't really mind Zappos getting in front of them. But I get it. Even if you're a Zappos customer, you kind of get nervous about Zappos getting into a fairly personal conversation with you and your friends. But visually, is that better than IMs back and forth? I think so. Is it better than emailing links back and forth? I think so, but it wasn't quite there. And I think, I've talked to a couple of startups that are trying to solve this, and I actually think maybe just as a single-use startup, you're maybe not going to be a billionaire from it, but I think people might say, I'd use a single-use app or startup for that. So again, kind of some of the challenges as a big brand. So like I said, it's hard for a brand to inject themselves. The value needs to be extremely high. Like when you're thinking about creating any kind of social commerce thing, it needs to be so obvious why this is better than what I'm doing today. And I'll take it on ourselves. This isn't a project that we're giving up, but it's definitely a project that's on the back burner now because we were so far from seeing the engagement levels we needed. And I think if we reapproach this, we'd have to back to the drawing board kind of thing. So there's some kind of things to think about. So I'd like to give one example that I'll tell you right now that kind of works. And it's not, but it's kind of the great thing about Zappos Labs. I think Zappos Labs, and I talk to a lot of retailers who are trying to do labs environments. I tell them the number one thing you need to think about, and if you're in a big company regardless, is you need to treat this like R&D. Like if your CTO or your CEO says, great, we're going to create a labs team, you need to generate 1% of sales next year, it's going to make you make some weird decisions. It's going to push you to say, what are better ways we can give coupons to our customers? And I think then what's the point, right? If you're really trying to do experimental stuff, you need that top-down support of trying experiments. So here's something, and so when I talk to some other big brands, they're like, we want to get into this social thing, we kind of have our Facebook fan page down, but we don't really know where to start. I give them, this is a super easy thing. Getting people to share their order after they make it. And some brands actually are, there's, and this is another one of those strange things, there's entire startups that do this, like FriendBuy, like entire startups that are based around this, so there's actually some real business. So if you get someone to share their order, tweet their order, or pin their order, and you get them to do it for free, it's kind of like they're advertising for you. Because not just are they saying, hey, check out this shoe, they're saying, I bought this shoe, I bought this dress. That's a pretty strong endorsement. And it's relatively simple to implement. So I think we implemented that, and we saw some really great numbers. So we saw, for example, and we learned a little bit about our customer base. We learned, for example, do people like to tweet more or pin more? What do you think people like to do more, tweet or pin? Pin. And that was really interesting too. We were, like, for example, when we were guessing on this, like, before we launched this, we were guessing maybe Facebook and pin would be about the same, and Twitter would be, like, just right behind it. But we saw was people wanted to pin, like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but maybe like 14 times as much as tweet. Because if you think about pinning, it's easy. You know, and that's actually from, who's a marketer here? Any marketers? When Pinterest came, it kind of blew marketers' minds because they finally found a channel where you couldn't be too spammy. Like, it worked to pin the shitload out of stuff. Like, if you run a Facebook fan page and you did 40 Facebook fan posts a day, people are going to unlike your page like crazy. But if you're a marketer and you control your Pinterest account and you pin 40 times a day, that works. So I think we kind of said, well, okay, I think that's what consumers individually thought. You know, maybe they felt like tweeting is kind of bragging, right? You know, check out the swag I just got, but pinning is just, you know, I got something cool. What do you think brought the most traffic in? One pin, one tweet, or one Facebook share? Facebook. So if I could say a customer came to me, do you want me to pin it? Just one customer, not our entire do you want me to pin it, share it on Facebook, or tweet it? I do tweet every day. Because here's the thing, like, if people are tweeting orders, what we've seen, and we read every single tweet that's tweeted out, if you care enough to tweet, you're actually saying something like, we were amazed, so we read all the tweets, and then we saw this one tweet that kind of hit us like a ton of bricks. This one guy, and he was an author. He wasn't even like a runner, but he tweeted, best shoes ever, with a link to his order. And we're like, that is a pretty strong endorsement. And you can even think, like, if you just pinned that with a little description, best shoes ever, it doesn't stand out. But if that caught your eye in your Twitter stream, I think that worked. And, you know, there's a lot of noise in Facebook. There's a lot of noise in all these channels, but that's why we saw it. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. And I think a different brand would try this exact same experiment and could see completely different distribution of how people are sharing. So that's kind of what I encourage you, even if you're a small commerce brand, try this and you'll see what your customers care about. And then it'll kind of tell you, like, well, maybe we need to put more or less efforts on Twitter or Pinterest. Sure. Yeah, totally. We've done that exact same thing. So we've tried, we A/B tested without the verbs there. So it was like just Facebook logo, Twitter logo, pin it logo. And the moment we put in the verbs there, it went up by, I can't remember, a couple percent. And then a couple other small things we A/B tested. And this is kind of, it's not rocket science. It doesn't make or break you as a company, but kind of fun things to try. I did this one talk and I almost fell off the stage. I was like, this is going to be the best YouTube video if that ever happens. But anyway, we added that heart there, and we saw people, and it used to be just share your order. And then the moment we added the heart, love your order, we increased shares by like 7%. So it's just things to try. You never know, right? You never know what's going to work. If someone said, bet money on if is that going to make a difference, I'm like, maybe. I have no idea. So you don't know until you try. And this is super low risk, right? You know, you're not making it super obtrusive. I think I've seen a couple sites where, like Cafe Press, I don't know if they still do it, but when you make your order confirmation, it's a huge modal. Share your order on Facebook and get 10% off your next order. Pretty powerful. I'm sure they get a ton of shares for that. But I think Zappos just tries to be a little bit more subtle there. But, so we've seen great data from that, but it's still a tiny percentage of their orders. Again, you know, I think like on our peak day last year, we had 200,000 orders in a day. That day we probably had 12 tweets. And we had a lot more pins, a lot of Facebook shares. So it's hard to say that makes a difference in our business, but the learnings we got out of it, like, was way more valuable than the actual shares. So we saw some of that. Not many customers tweets. Talk a little bit about that. Great place to start if you're trying to think about this. Yeah, please. And then expand. So the question is, did we ever try and put it behind just one kind of share button so people could expand it? We haven't. One of the things we used to try on our product details page was, back in the day, I think this was pretty common, there'd be one share button, and then it would open up a list of 30 icons that you could share it on Tumblr, everything like that. And we found that no one did that. Like, you know, no one wanted to share on Friendster, even though we had that as an option. It was crazy, right? Like, so the moment we replaced that mega share with just 3 options, total sharing went up. So this is clearly hard. You know, Zappos Labs, we've been running for 2 years. We've learned a ton. We've brought a lot of it back to headquarters in Las Vegas. But I think a natural question is, like, you know, like, we haven't had a home run as a team. And I think, you know, it's kind of like almost angel investing sometimes. You're like, you try a lot of things. You're going to get a couple singles, maybe a couple doubles, but you're really looking for that big home run. That was like, boom, we didn't think that'd be huge, but we all of a sudden got $5 million of sales in that. We haven't hit that yet. But so far, I still got a job, and that's pretty awesome. And but Zappos, again, is super supportive of that. They keep saying, keep trying lots of different things. So why should we bother? So a lot of brands, after I kind of give them the rundown of how hard this is, they're like, well, maybe we're going to rethink labs. I think this is a reminder of why we bother, because it's not making up problems. Like, it's something like the what to wear stuff, people shopping with their friends. Those are real things people do, and making that better is good. So I'm going to kind of blast through a couple things that I see other kind of smaller startups to some mid-range people that I think are doing well in the social space. So I won't go into too much stuff, but these are, and it's interesting. If you guys are really getting into e-commerce, I totally recommend you read this whole e-commerce series that Pando Daily's doing. It's a bunch of articles, and it's talking about how hard e-commerce is. And I never even thought of this until I think I read one of Sarah's articles. They said Zappos was the last e-commerce 1.0 company. And now everything that you're seeing today is like e-commerce 2.0. Like the Fabs, the ModCloths, the Nasty Gals. And they're saying it's a challenge for brands like Zappos, who's like e-commerce 1.0, to think about how do we be social out of the gate. You know, Fab started as gay Yelp. Social was in their DNA. So when they launched the retailer, they were super good at it. How much sales it drives, I don't know, but I think if you ask people what are the top 5 things you think of on Fab, I think social might fall in there for some people. Nasty Gal, anyone follow Nasty Gal at all? So if you guys, amazing story. So Sophia, the founder of Nasty Gal, she ran her company for like 5 years, bootstrapped. She started as an eBay store where she would arbitrage eBay into vintage items, find them, resell them on her store, and she built this amazing brand credibility through Nasty Gal. Launched Nasty Gal, I think last year they did, I don't know, $200 million, essentially bootstrapped. So they just raised $40 million a couple months ago because they're seeing this amazing founder. So what this is they actually use this vendor Olapic. So I'll talk a little bit more about like how startups can help. Olapic does this great thing, and it's not rocket science to build, but you know, dev resources are always tight in a big brand. They can Instagram or tweet with certain hashtags, and it automatically appears here. I think that really works well for Nasty Gal. Lululemon's implemented them. If Zappos tried that as a brand, hey, Instagram or tweet your pictures, you know what we'd end up with? Cats in boxes. Every time we try any user-generated content on Zappos, it's cats and babies in boxes. So it's hard for a big brand where we don't have this amazing niche. Nasty Gal has this great niche, young, edgy women's fashion. So when they have Instagram pics, they don't need to filter them. It's not cats in boxes. It's beautiful, young, edgy women. So I won't talk. ModCloths does some really interesting things. They do some social, like be the buyer. And you can actually help choose what they're going to do next. Winelo, The Find, Fancy, if you haven't heard of those, check those out. So I think a lot of them saw, and I don't know how chicken eggy it was, but a lot of them saw Pinterest, e-commerce, but it's so hard to buy stuff in Pinterest. And so a lot of these, if you check those out, they're kind of shoppable Pinterest. And each of them are making traction in their own niches. I think, for example, Fancy, I think Fancy probably skews a bit more male. It's not all male. So check those out. So why does Zappos care? Because social does work for some people, and we need to catch up. I won't talk about this too much, but I think a lot of big brands have tried, if we're going to do something social gifting. And I haven't seen data from Walmart. So this was Walmart, ShopeeCat, Amazon has a friends and family gifting, Facebook gifts. I don't know any official data from this, so don't quote me on it. But the fact you're not hearing any success stories from those, I think is kind of a sign that social gifting is actually pretty hard. Because for me to tell you what your friend actually wants, pretty hard, whether I read your Facebook page or not. But I think this is a crazy Facebook story, or social commerce story. Who's heard of Poshmark? So they're doing amazing things. They launched, I don't know, November 2011, so maybe been around 13, 14 months. So I just did this screenshot maybe yesterday. This is Tracy. It's one of their founders, so she probably cheats a bit because I think she's one of the people that you are suggested to follow when you sign up. She has almost 1 million people who care about the used stuff she's selling. Like, if you've never used Poshmark, it's an app that essentially lets you buy and sell used women's fashion. She has 1 million people who care about what she's selling online that are following her closet. Who manages the Facebook page here? Anyone? A couple people? How many fans do you have? 1,000? How many fans do you? 5,000. Anyone have a lot of fans or a decent amount of fans? How many do you have? 50,000. That's great. How many would you guess Zappos has? Throw it up. So we only have 500,000 fans. And that's actually really weird for other reasons. But to think about, Tracy has more people who care about what's in her used clothing closet, twice as many as Zappos has Facebook fans. Like, that just shows like where e-commerce is going. Poshmark released some numbers recently when they did their latest round. They did about $100 million of inventory in their app. They take a 20% cut of everything. That's not 100 million in sales, but 100 million of inventory. They get 20% of every transaction, and they have 0 inventory costs. If they can make that market scale, that's amazing. And what's another crazy metric is, so I'm kind of stalking Poshmark a bit because I love what they're doing. I do a screenshot of Tracy's account every couple weeks. January 24th, what is that? 7 weeks ago? 400,000 followers. She had the same number of Facebook fans as we had. In the 5 weeks, she's doubled that. We've gained 30,000 fans. So it just shows like this is why social is important, because people are starting to think and shop this way. This was kind of timely. Soldzy. This also completely blows my mind. I had this slide up already, but they actually had TechCrunch article today. I think they just announced they raised $1 million. But in Facebook, I talked about Facebook stores don't work, right? But Soldzy, amazingly, it's a software platform, so you could be, I forgot what this brand is. They sell these little, it's for small mom and pop shops, but they sell these little stuffed dolls. And you'd literally post on their Facebook page, who wants this? If you want to buy it for $15, comment sold, and it automatically sends you an invoice and you purchase it via that email. Like, who would ever use that? They're doing $1 million a month in transactions across their customers, and they just have started. Like, so people are starting to shift. Where I talked a little bit about earlier, people come to Zappos not expecting social. When people start trying this, they're going to start expecting social stuff soon. And if we don't have this there, I think we're going to lose out. So those are a couple examples of, and pretty kind of crazy examples. And you know, I wish these guys super success. Would Zappos ever use it? Maybe not. I think it's great for mom and pop shops, but definitely things we can learn from. So I think kind of going to the root of the problem, how can your startup help? And you know, at Zappos Labs, one of the great things about being in San Francisco is I probably meet with 2 to 10 startups a week in various capacities. I think sometimes people are coming guns blazing, selling. What's up, Jerry? Speaking of. And sometimes people just want to say, hey, Zappos, I'd love to hear what you're working on, and maybe we can help, maybe we can't. So I'll kind of take any of those meetings, you know, schedule permitting. So I'll kind of just give you guys some tips on if you're a startup trying to sell to a big brand, what may or may not work. Do some research. You'd be so surprised. For example, I'll give you one example is do some research into the brand. And all this stuff is not rocket science, but it's kind of amazing. I need to remind startups. I even had for this launch conference, someone saw I was coming here and emails me. He's just like, hey, and you know, apologies if you're here, but I'm going to call you out. But I'd love to be able to help you guys with your international expansion. We do automatic translation of websites. when it's been super public, we have no plans on international expansion in the next 3 to 5 years. So he's like, he could have the best translation service where we might be thinking about wanting to use when we're ready for that. But the way he pitched the email means he clearly never even checked. Like, he actually already thought we were in some international countries. So right away, when I get that second email, so I told him, I was just, we're not interested. He's like, well, keep us in mind. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to keep this guy in mind, right? So do some research. It's no-brainer stuff, I think. Or, for example, like, we'll talk to a company that says, hey, use our product for your order sharing. I'm like, oh, we kind of have that on the website already. They're like, oh, you do? And it's like, just, make that good first impression. I don't really refer to it as burn bridges, but, first impressions do count. Listen, again, a no-brainer. But again, I'll sometimes meet with startups, and they just come just pitching. Not even asking what your problem is, what problems are you trying to solve. So I think, again, no-brainer, but just people really need to do that more. This is tough for me as a Zappos Labs team, but actually I think really important for some startups is understand we move slow. Like, I'm talking, even Zappos I think actually moves really fast for a company, but even we move so. For example, we've talked to some companies that the only way their software will work is if they get a place on the product details page. And our product details pages are like bread and butter of the company. Like, it's a multi-month process to get stakeholders to see structuring A/B tests, validating contracts, blah, blah, blah. So it sucks, but it's kind of reality. So I think a little bit of patience there. And just like, when you're courting a new significant other, if you're too pushy with them, you're going to turn them off. And you kind of want to understand that process and understand our scale. So again, like a lot of startups, it's totally okay if you're a startup and you're just coming to run an idea by me and saying, we're really early on, we don't have any customers, but we'd love to hear what you think. I love having those conversations. And even with my venture or angel investing hat on, I love having those conversations. But if you're a really early startup saying, we can solve this problem for you, and we'll solve it, have it implemented in 1 week, and you don't have any clients, you don't understand that we have 25 million customers, that we do hundreds of thousands of orders a day, like, you lose so much credibility there. So don't be afraid to preface your conversation with your startup is, we're still trying to figure stuff out. I'll call Jerry out in the back there. Jerry's retention science, and he was super clear. He's like, I got this startup. We're doing some really cool things. I don't know if it's right for you guys, but I'd just love to have a conversation to see about what's working, what's not doing. And I'm like, yeah, Jerry, let's jam, let's talk. So I think that's pretty important. Respect the data. And this is something that's been kind of surprising to me is, so for example, we've been pitched by a couple startups that say, we're going to make the best recommendation engine ever. So, so Zappos, like a lot of sites have, people who looked at this also looked at this. And, improving recommendations is pretty important as a startup. They're like, we're going to do the best recommendations. We're going to beat Amazon-level recommendations. We're going to beat your own in-house stuff. All we need is all your customer data and everything they've ever bought. I'm like, well, and what's crazy is I've actually talked to a startup that they're like, so they was more in the shoe space. They're like, if you give us all your shoe-related data, we guarantee you we'll solve your shoe fitting problem. I'm like, okay, so who else are you selling to? And then, yeah, and they're like, and when we solve this and we're going to sell to like Macy's and Nordstrom, I'm like, using our data? They're like, well, yeah. I'm like, so Zappos is super open, right? I mentioned in the last office I was talking. I'll talk to any team that wants to set up a labs group. I talk with J. Crew. But, there's some lines that we need to keep our data ourselves. Luckily, we've been successful in the shoe world and we're branching out. But, we're not going to give up our customer shoe buying behavior. We probably have some of the best there. So if you're creating a startup that needs a lot of data, you need to have a good strategy to legitimately say, your data is segmented from every one of our customers, and a process and a thoughtful thing to say, because if you're building a network, it's actually hard to say, we're going to unlearn your data for this other customer. And I get it. As a technologist, I get that's almost impossible. But we're not going to do some of those deals unless you say your data will never mix with other people's data. And those network learnings won't go to other customers. So respect the data. Define your value. Like I said, I talk with startups all the time. And again, it depends if you're just that exploratory phase or trying to sell us. But some customers are like, so this is what my startup does. How do you think you could use us? I'm like, well, this has just been a 30-minute conversation. You've been thinking about your startup for 2 years. You should tell me how I think you should use you. So you should come in with like pretty clear ideas of how Zappos could use you. And, be open to other thoughts. But define like, if you use us, you could maybe see an X% increase in ABC. I'm like, that's really interesting. But if you leave it open-ended, it's like, use us and it'll be cool. I'm like, my office is doing enough stuff that's just cool. I think if we're going to go with a startup, we need to kind of see more value. So I think define your value. This is slightly different. Define success. And this is actually a challenge for new startups as well. Because they're like, again, use our product. I'm like, okay, so let's say we used your product and we did a 2-week beta. What would success look like for us to say, let's keep going on as a brand? And you'd be surprised. So many startups say, I don't know, we just keep trying and seeing if we see success when we get there. And again, you know, I think because I'm meeting with so many people, because brands meet with so many people, you need to be able to say at least, it's kind of like startup business plans, right? Some people say business plans are bullshit, but at least it's a hypothesis of success. But if you don't even have that, then it's tough for us to work together. Make it easy. So again, I get also pitched on these startups. All right, we got this great idea for you. It's going to be super simple for you guys to implement. All you need to do is code to our 17 APIs and then provide 8 data feeds for us and then 17 tracking pixels on every page of your website. Simple. I'm like, you have no idea how hard that is. That's going to be like a 10-year project at Zappos. So I think we've talked to some companies and I think they've done, you know, like when I hear just plop in a little bit of JavaScript, I'm kind of excited about that. Although, you know, I think there's still like that privacy issues. Are you respectful of our data? But that's easy. Or, you know what? You guys don't need to call our APIs. If you have APIs, we'll push to you guys. We'll push data to you. You don't need to do any work. That's also really interesting. I think, again, you know, kind of respecting the scale, respecting we move slow. I think that kind of puts your leg up. I think that one of the most important things is, I kind of talked about this in, I think in my other session, is although you want to maybe sell to Zappos, if you're building a network or maybe your own social network of fashionista, although eventually you'll need to make money and sell to folks like Zappos or have Zappos partner or advertise on your network, you need to focus on your users first. And the analogy I give is, imagine if Facebook started on day one with brand pages. Like on day one, like college students could sign up and then Zappos could say, hey, buy these shoes on Facebook. I don't think Facebook would be where they are today. They have that razor sharp focus. It's all about our users. Let's grow our user base. Let's do what's best for our customers. And then we'll introduce some brand stuff. And you know, you even hear some pushback on that now, right? Even here, I'm still seeing too many brands. So I think they're still figuring that out. But I think that's one of the most important things you can do. Because if you make a solution that's good for us but not for your users, it's not good for us if you have no users. So, and again, that's more in the context if you have a company like that. Hashtag DLUURDDFM. Just joking. You can't use that either. And then the last piece of advice is something I stole is, you know, a startup is just be awesome. Super, it's almost like a startup cliche, but I think it's actually super true, is, you know, come in with a great story. Come in with, like, passion. You know, I've met with some startups that are also, and I'm kind of giving you these startup horror stories, is they come out of, they're maybe halfway through their incubator. They're like, yeah, you know, this is our 3rd idea in the incubator. What do you think? I'm like, well, if you're not excited about it, it's hard for me to be excited about it, you know. So I think, like, if you're about ready to pitch that brand, I'm not saying fake excitement because I think we'll be able to tell faked excitement. But, you know, if you kind of live, drink it, like, you can bring us along in that journey. I think that's really exciting. So all that advice is, like, the reality is it's hard for startups to do business with big brands. You know, as many startups I talk with, in our 2 years at Zappos Labs, we haven't formally engaged with any of them. And that actually sucks to me. Like, that was one of my goals. When we created the labs, we thought we'd be doing startup partnership here, startup partnership here. We've done kind of some marketing level partnerships. Like, you know, there's this one gift giving app called Picky, and we said, you know, include our products in there. But it wasn't like a hardcore, like, we're going to use your technology to make our customers' experience better. So I'm dying to find a startup that kind of hits all those criteria, that makes sense for Zappos, and that we can kind of mutually be successful for. And that's hard. So, but I'm super excited about it. If you guys, yeah, let's talk. Totally. We'd love to talk more, Chip. But that's me, and I'd love to kind of, you know, we got 7 minutes left. Take any questions, comments, ideas. I love stealing people's ideas and taking credit for them. It's great. Sir, what was your name? What's going on? Absolutely. Yep. It's revenue. Yep. Absolutely. So when in our experiments, we definitely look at engagement and revenue, but probably number one is engagement for us. And because I think it's, you know, sometimes revenue comes when you kind of tweak that last step in the funnel. But if you can get people excited about using those first three steps, like using pinpointing, oh, I love clicking around, I'm not quite ready to buy, then, you know, just tweak the end. So we look for early trends in engagement. Yep.
But only, you know, and only 2% used it. But can't you also use that like as a signal? So the people who did, like the people who do engage with you on Twitter, that kind of puts them into a separate segment than like a grandmother, and you would have to treat. But if you know who they are because they came from Twitter, then you can maybe push that pin.
Absolutely. So great question. So I think that's one of our big challenges we're thinking about all the time. The question was, I'm going to paraphrase, but if you know those 2% cared about tweets about products, can you just maybe segment those users and just show it to those users? And I think that's a goal, and that's one of our big goals, is how can we put pinpointing in front of Pinterest users, Twitter in front of Twitter users? The challenge is actually, like, you know, if you think about, if you ask 10 customers who were on Zappos today and how many of them actually bothered to log in, you know, if you're just browsing, you don't even log in. So actually sometimes that segmentation is a little bit hard. So I've been thinking, like, for example, after you log in, I think it's a great opportunity to say, you know, do you want to see this? Ask them. But also sometimes users don't want to work. They don't want to configure stuff in a shopping site. They don't want to be prompted with. And it's kind of one of those things, if you ask a user, like, hey, we notice you're active on Twitter. Do you want to see tweets about products? Like, I think people also have that initial hesitation. No, it's just going to be spammy. You know, even if I like it, I just no to everything. But I think it's one of our goals of our labs team is how do we put it more intelligently in front of people? It's a great observation.
You talked a lot about working with startups, and I gained a lot from as a CEO from you and the learnings that you guys have had over the past 2 years. Do you spend time when you work with founders saying, we tried something like that? Like, for instance, you talked about accounts.
Yep.
I know when I download an app and it asks me to sign Facebook Connect or my email address, I delete it right away. So in doing what we've been doing, we've sort of changed that process to build an account, but build it over a period of engagement as opposed to having them sign up.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think in terms of our learnings, like we as a team, there's a couple speakers in our office. We love doing stuff like this. And again, when startups come into our office, we do some events in our office where we'll just kind of jam on different things. So we're happy to share some of what we've learned. But it's interesting, you know, that account thing again, it's like the exact same brand could try the exact same thing and see completely different results. And whether you're a startup or a big brand, just different levels of trust. For example, like as low as our Facebook Connect engagement might be, would you be more or less likely to Facebook Connect with like Walmart? That's not a shot to Walmart. I think Walmart does amazing things, but it's like, you know, that trust level is there. So we'll definitely share a lot of that stuff though.
So who would you engage with within a brand, say Nike? Would it be their CMO, their social media manager?
And it depends. I think every organization is different. That's the challenge. Like, you know, not all organizations have labs teams. You know, I love from, you know, Zappos, I'm blessed to be part of a labs team, so I'll take a lot of those first things. And, you know, and then, you know, in an organization, like a lot of people just email Tony because it's just CEO or Tony at Zappos.com. I get a lot of forwards from him. So it's not the worst thing in the world to just try and reach who you can. Right. But it's tough. I mean, it's just kind of getting yourself out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that probably is about time. I think, or maybe one more quick question, if there is one.
How much do you think of your A/B testing over the last X? Do you think is because of consumer adoption doesn't understand social?
Yep.
And do you plan to keep rolling these programs back through, say, over the next 5 years?
Absolutely. So I think that's it. It's a great thing about code is obviously it gets out of date and maybe, you know, the code's branched a bit, so it's hard to merge in. But Zappos is definitely willing to retry stuff just because it didn't work one time. And it could even, very temporal as well. For example, pinpointing. We could launch that in March and have no traction. We could launch it come holiday season where we position it as a gift guide. And, you know, it's just 6 months later, but people are like, yeah, you know, I don't know what to buy my significant other. I'll totally use pinpointing.
Sure.
So I think finding that time and place, and especially in retail, it's so cyclical. Back to school does weird stuff.
Right.
Valentine's does weird stuff. Weather does interesting things. Like, we see our sales, like, you know, when we, for example, right now there's this huge storm in Chicago. At Zappos, we're like, yeah, winter clothing sales. And so it's like you just never know, right? So I think timing is a really interesting thing. So I think we probably have to wrap up. Is there another? You're up now? Cool. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.